like that.
It just dropped on us for no reason. The phone's plugged in, everything's fine. I don't understand that. But poor Casey, he's coming along and he's his tears are running down and I just wanted to get a deer. And we stop in the middle of the road and kneel down. I knelt down with him and he was so cute. And I said, I'm so sorry. And I can see a million big bucks in your future because you want it so bad. He did. He wanted it so bad. And sure enough, later on, now he just walks out there, hunts half an hour. He's got one, right. But that part of it, you had to go through it, and it wasn't that he wasn't going to stick with it or anything like that. He was, and he was just going to get it done. So his drive was still there, and he wanted to do it. And now, also too, he's sort of mastered it, and now it's not as
Sorry guys about
guttural
that.
for him.
It just quit. We had service, we had everything. It was fine. It just all of a sudden ducked out on us. So we're sorry about that.
Oh man.
We were on a roll too. I don't even remember where we were at. Yeah. But anyway, so we'll jump back onto the list here and we'll try to keep rolling. We apologize for that. Yeah. Some kind of weird glitchy thing happened.
Now, it's also important to understand why they want to get into hunting, what they hope to get out of it. And some of the things may be really obvious, and some of them may not be so much. It'll depend. One of the things I worry about is that they're just doing it to make me happy. I didn't want them just dad's into it, so I have to do it, right? I didn't want to have to like shove them through it somehow or make them really love it because I loved it and this is just the way it has to be. I wanted to inspire them to like it, but also too, if they had other things, I was into all of their things as well. So we were into each other's stuff, which is pretty important, and that seems to really matter a lot as well. There's going to be a chance for you as a mentor to help with their ethics. Some of the reasons that there's so many like back and forth among sportsmen all the time about how it should be and my way is the best way and all of that is some of the inherited ideas that we got from our mentors. As you speak to someone and you try to get them to understand your way of looking at it or thinking about it, remember that you're affecting them and it might not be for the best all the time. So I tried my best to let them decide. Also, too, when it comes to the actual killing, that's a tender moment, and it's a pivotal moment, and it's really shocking. And how that goes down and how you would want it to go down for you or for them that's another really, I would try to be as careful about that as possible. And it's a sensitive time, and it's one that you don't forget. That first time, you don't forget that. It's really, you probably don't forget any of them. It may come to that almost, especially the ones that are really important to you. I don't remember every rabbit, but boy, I sure do remember every deer. And I remembered every rabbit for years and years and years before I started like letting some of that go because I just made so many new memories. I didn't bother remembering every little thing. But if anything, it also gets you to fall in love. You get them to fall in love with the land. You get them to care about what's happening on the landscape. You get them to care about wildlife and its protection. You get them to care about hunting, about shooting, about guns. They develop a relationship with these things. And it's important to have a good relationship with not only the things that you possess and you have, but also too with your friends and with the rest of society. And if you're benefiting yourself and society, it's probably a good idea to do it. And I would always use that as a filter. Should we let this fish go? And they'd be standing there holding it, and they're thinking about it. And then I would leave the decision up to them. And then when they got home and they didn't want to clean the fish, right? Another pivotal learning. So I was always looking for the learning opportunity in every single thing that we did. And by doing that, they knew I was doing that and they started doing it for themselves as well. That's one of the things that hunting can really do is it can give you a chance to discover the learning opportunities at every moment. And there's so many of them. There are just so many things. And nature is so huge and immense, and it takes so much to understand it. And I don't think any one person can really even begin to comprehend the complexity of the natural world. So every little bit of it that you can understand, and then every little bit of yourself that you can understand, and then when you understand nature fairly well and you start understanding yourself fairly well, now you're able to understand other people fairly well. You can relate to them. You can relate to the nature and what's going on. You can relate to yourself and what's happening, what's going on. And then you can relate to other people when they're out there and what they have going on. And if you're not lining up with those other people, you can say, nah, it's not for me. I'm not into that. I'd rather be over here. So that adjusting of what you do and how you do it can help, and you'll learn to develop your own filters about what it is. A lot of our loves and our hates, our prejudices are passed on as well. We can love deer and hate coyotes, right? That's just a classic example. There's a lot of that will happen at the time while you're doing what you're doing, and over time you'll end up having to adjust that a little bit, because there may not be that big a deer around, and if you really want a deer, you may have to adjust what you want in order to have one. So that adjustability in your thoughts, you'll have to develop that as well. And I used hunting as a way of getting the boys to do that, so that they became better people because of the experiences that they went through, and their thirst for learning and not wanting to suffer things, that they got that from being together and going outdoors and going into the world, and the camaraderie of us going and being a team sort of and doing things, but also individuals that worked. It was a great, especially for young men, it's such a great way to engage in things, because that's what boys like to do. Boys like to engage. And I'm not saying girls don't either, because they absolutely do as well. But in general, for most, it's a thing where you want to engage in the natural world, something that's other than human intelligence, and you won't really get it any other place. Your pets and your animals, that's something that's other than human intelligence, so that's good. But like wild things and wild places and getting people to love them, there's probably no better way. How are we making out?
Trying to figure it out.
Yeah. One of the other things that's very important that I've found over the years is the continued camaraderie may not last, right? If your hunting partner dies, or there's some land that you can't go to anymore, if there's an opportunity that is no longer there anymore, and things change, right? All things change, and not everything's forever. So there's going to be a certain amount of passage from doing things one way and being able to pick it up and change it and bring it over here. Instead of going there, go over here, do something different, swap it out. That's the other wonderful thing about being in the outdoors, is there's so many ways to engage the outdoors that if one way kind of fades away, you can work into another direction of it. And I didn't have lots of money or guns when I was little, but I had a bow. So I went out with the bow, and you use what you have, and I got really good at archery. And then later on, as the time went on, I'm like, well, let's go back into archery again, and we'll go rabbit hunting. And rabbit hunting got fairly easy with a firearm after a while. So I'm like, let's make it a little more difficult. So the skill abilities, when you start really mastering some of your skills, now you may want to swap it up a little bit and change it out a little bit. And then over time, if it starts losing it just a little bit, and I don't want to do it that way anymore, that'll happen. Well, it's just a natural progression that you can expect to go through in most of your life. And that part of it has been really key to knowing that things are going to change. It's not going to stay that same forever. And some of the places where you used to go or what you used to do are going to change over time. But there's always opportunities. There's almost always opportunities. And I as a taxidermist, right, I literally know tens of thousands of hunters, and I see them quite a few every year. And there's a lot of whining, like, oh, this isn't the same anymore, and that's and at my best days were back here, and there's no chance of this. And one of the things about the social media part of it is that you can now engage in a little bit through someone else. You can understand some of it, and we're all going to new states. We're all trying new things, and we're exposed to stuff that we weren't exposed to before. It was a big deal for Michael Carmichael, one of the old books that I had, where someone went out and spent a lot of time going to Alaska, going to the desert, hunting bighorn sheep in all these different places. And I read all those bighorn sheep articles, and there was no way that I would even consider going to those places. But I checked it out because that's what there was, and I was hungry for something, and there it was, so I read about it. That part of it, social media has made it so everyone might consider wanting to go elk hunting. Now, we can't all elk hunt, so we have to allocate tags, and we have to make sure that we don't just annihilate them all, because everyone wants a piece of that. Over time, as the world is fairly crowded and hunting takes up space, there's going to be this little bit of stepping on each other just a little bit, and that's going to happen in some places more than others. And I know that there's this you should hunt quietly kind of thing going on, and in a way I agree with it. In a way I don't, because there's certain attributes that are so important to people and that they need to get, and you don't necessarily have to get an elk to get most of the elk experience. Even though killing an elk is fairly important, and if you did it enough, you certainly should be able to. If you applied and you worked at it hard enough and found a way, you can probably find one. But just being in elk country alone is a phenomenal thing. Being in sleeping at 10,000 feet is a phenomenal thing, right? So all of the camping and all of that part of it, that's equally part of the experience that you want to be in on. And most people, that's actually what they're mostly going to get. They're probably not going to get an elk, but they'll get the experience of being out there. And we have to see the value in all the moments that we spend that is just as great, if not greater, than the actual possession of the material substance also. Even though there's a little bit of you that may need that as well, because we're still humans. We still want to touch things, we still want to hold things, we still want to be interactive with our world. And that's one of the things that it does, is it helps you be interactive with things. And that's important, and it's almost vital to human beings. We want to touch the fur of the dog, we want to feel the hair. There's that hands-on part of the human being that is intricate, and it does matter, and we want to get in on that. We want to be part of that, and especially like our inner child wants some of those things, and we should. And that feel and breath of the cold air, all of that matters. It matters so much, and I don't know a better way of getting people to feel like part of the natural world, which is important. Just looking at it from a ship and photographing it isn't the same as actually touching the ice, right? So that part of it matters. We need to be kind of hands-on. That's the human experience, and it can help make you a better person. And I'm bummed that I can't read some of the comments here.
I've got you on.
Because I'm sure you guys have had a lot to say as well, and I don't want to leave you out of it.
I'm trying to get that other one closed out, but I kind of lost. Right. It's through what you've got in your hands, so we'll just leave it live and I'll edit it later.
Your son took their first buck and was exciting for you, and I didn't show it until I could read their experience, because killing something can make you a better hunter than I think you would have if you didn't. No question, right? You learn a lot about yourself when you're the one pulling the trigger. And it's a key part of things, right? That possession, that having, and the decision making. Now, one of the things about hunting is it's nonstop decision making. And of course, when you make a decision, it could very well be life and death kind of thing. It could also, you feel like there's this section of you that could influence the way that things turn out, right? Do I stay here or do I move to a new spot, right? It's this nonstop decision-making thing that is kind of like every one of them are a pivotal decision, you think, at the time. And especially when you're new. At first, you'll be like, Mom, let's just go over here. And you don't think it's that big a deal. And you go over and you sit and you don't see anything. And you say, well, maybe I made a bad decision. And in a short while, you start second guessing decisions. And the more you want results, you start applying pressure to yourself. Many people go fishing because they like the fact that they can just sit there, throw out into the abyss, and let it sink and say, well, a fish will come along, and they'll just let it hang and they won't worry about it like a child, right? You give a child a fishing pole for the first time, they walk down to the dock, they throw the thing out there, and they say, somewhere out there in this unknown universe underneath that I can't see, a fish will come along and he'll bite that. Maybe, I don't know, let's just throw it out and we'll just wait. So they wait and wait and wait, and then all of a sudden, oh, there's something there, and then they pull it out of that abyss and bring it up, and yay, and look what I got. And then later on, they'll go back down, and they'll fish for a week and not catch a thing, and they'll throw it out. The weeds have grown now, and the worm goes down in the weeds, and there's nothing there anymore, right? So they're like, I can't catch fish anymore. I caught one here way back when, and I haven't gotten a thing since, right? This decision-making thing. And them wanting to not have to make a lot of decisions, just heave it out there and go. Then later on, when they learn, well, when you're in a boat and you fish in this method, you'll catch fish all day long. They were like, oh my God. And it wasn't left to chance. It was, if I do these things, it will come. And they would begin doing it. And the pressure, right? You would build pressure to get results. And of course, as you go through those stages of being a shooter, then you work up to actually killing something. Then maybe you want to limit out. You want to get all the rabbits you could possibly get. And then later on, you might say, well, let's try a different method of getting them. We'll use a bow. We'll use a shotgun. The method stage, tree stand, right? And then you work into maybe a trophy stage where I want to get a really big one. And then you want to be a sportsman and give back and take people out and do habitat work and enjoy a wider range of things, join a hunting group or something like that. All of those stages, which you could be in all of them at once or just in the trophy, right? That's one of the things that makes this experience so good for you, is that it's nonstop learning. There's chances to get better at everything all the time. You can excel at all kinds of things, and you can better yourself and other people all the time. And it's so dynamic and good. And when that first time comes around, the way the memories are burnt into your brain is a huge, huge part of it as well. Because it's something that that first deer you shoot, you do not forget that, and how it went down and everything. It is just amazing how that kind of experience just becomes part of you. It really does. It's just amazing. Yeah. Hunting in Buxton, Maine, where I'm from, and hunting in Florida. Boy, those are two places that are totally different. Yep. And it'll be different some of the places that you go. Ain't no question about it. Yep. I think hunting is medicinal. Well, that's one of the things. That's a great point. That's one of the things that I look for when I when I was really that trip away from Maine, when I went by myself, or without the boys, but I went just myself and my brother-in-law and our friends, right? The four of us would, Pete and Lewis and Donnell, we'd all go to Maine, and we'd go up in the woods, and I would be alone in the Great North Woods for a week straight, and that was medicine for me, to get away from the work and the hustle of regular life, and to just be me and just be in the woods and just calm down, slow down, and way less decisions in the woods. Even though hunting's all about making decisions, they're spread out a little more. You don't have to make 3,500 a day like you might, in normal life. So that part of it was really good for me. And I always seemed to get my deer once I had worked through and pulled all the knots out of my rope. I'd spend the year making knots in my rope, and then I'd go to the woods to get all the knots out. That was literally what it was. That part of it, you bet. It was medicine for me. And when I had gotten myself in alignment, bang, I'd shoot a deer. Like, it would just straighten. Like, once I got all the kinks out of me and I got good with myself and I was back into being me again, I would just bang. All of a sudden, the success would just come. And it was so good for me. And you bet, medicinal for sure. And that's another one of the callings to many people. They want to go out and just, and I have something to watch, something to see, and something real and tangible in their hands. And it was so good for me. Absolutely. That's a great point. Yeah. Constant focus. That focus part of it too, that's another great point, because one thing I wanted the boys to be able to do is have a good long attention span, because sometimes you really need it. Deer are deer 24 hours a day, and we're only a deer hunter for about 2 weeks a year, right? So we're not anywhere near as sharp as a deer. A deer is sharp. They have to be. So I wanted the boys to be sharp, to be able to hold their attention and to focus. And it started with fishing. That was a great way to get them to learn how to focus. Casey is in a pull-up, standing on a dock with about 16 inches of water underneath the dock. And he would have a stick. I had a 3-foot stick with a 2.5, maybe 30-inch piece of fishing line and a hook hooked to the stick. And he would dunk it down, and the perch would come swimming out from under the dock and look at his little worm dangling there. And he would have to wait. And then, bonk, it would bite, and he'd yank. I taught him how to jab, right? And then he would lift the little perch up, and we would unhook it and put it back down. And I think 15 minutes later, he'd just come right back out and bit again, and he pulled it out again, right? But that focus of watching, and I said, you got to watch him. And at first, he would be upset. Oh, I didn't get him, and he doesn't bite it, and he just looks at it. And I'm like, stop moving it, right? But when he learned to focus, being real young like that, and just wait, and we would sit there and, see it. And he could watch it, and that experience and the intermittent reward that, now we've got him, and he would catch one. After a while, he was just, I got one. And other bigger kids would see him fishing and catching one right after the other with a stick and a string 30 inches long, just dipping it and just doing this one right after the other. In a short while, he was so good at it, and I would just unhook him and put a little piece of worm on, and he'd dunk it back down, and dunk, and he'd have another one. Older kids would watch that and get jealous because no one showed them how to fish. No one had taken the time. So I would tell him, show these big kids how to do it, and tell them to come and watch, and then let them try it. And he was little, and he's like, well, they're going to catch all these fish. And it's like, yeah, I know. They should catch them. You already caught them 4 times, right? Like, let them catch some. So they would come over and catch a few, and they would learn from him, and he would learn to teach. And he was just a little guy, and he'd say, just do this, bonk, right? It was a great inspirational thing. And it also taught him patience and focus. And then later on, when we were focusing to shoot, when we were focusing with the bow, all of that focus factor was huge, and it really did. It was so good for all the boys. And of course, they naturally, once you taught the oldest one, he taught the rest of them. And I would say to the young one, oh, see how he's focusing? You need to do that too. Absolutely.
All right. Got that. So at least didn't lose the first half.
Putting the kids into a nice lake trout or a salmon on a charter boat and taking them out, right? That early success, absolutely. If they come away with that feeling of life on the other end, right? Never trust somebody who doesn't fish. That's what a guy told me once, and I'm like, well, maybe. Later on, I started meeting people who didn't fish, and I was like, yeah, I think that guy's right. That was a big deal, and fishing was a wonderful way to get going on the outings, and then later on work into the hunting and small game was the next thing. I brought them squirrel hunting. You guys had one of those little small squirrel calls, which is basically a little dog squeaky thing. You can get a little dog toy that squeaks and turn that into a squirrel call. You just tear it out and then blow into it, and you can make a little squirrel barking warning thing. You can and make some sounds with it. So we got a little squirrel call, and I started taking the boys out, and we had a bunch of red pine, and it was loaded with squirrels and them giant pine cones. And you guys all went down there with a 22, and we would go down in the woods and sit down and make the squirrel sound, and then one would come out and run around. And then you guys, and oh yeah, I see him, and pew, 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 and shooting at him.
My first kill, Dad and Casey were up on this side of the shop, and I had gone down into the plantation pines by myself, and I had a 22, and I found a squirrel. And I remember the drama of the whole thing. Like, he's coming down the tree, and he's like, how they like face down the tree, he's holding on, and he's beep, 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 and I just cocked the hammer back, picked it up, and I got like rested on another tree, and I got it just perfect, and then I went pow, I shot him, and he fell on the ground, and he was dead, and I was like, I don't know what to do, right? So I just picked him up and went, I just ran back up to the house, and I was like, look at this thing, right?
I got one.
It was a big deal. I was like, I need to find them. I need to show them this,
Right,
and
right.
and it was quite a drama, and I hadn't thought about that for a long time,
The other thing that goes hand in hand with hunting is the storytelling. Now, man's been telling stories for millions of years. That's how we communicated. And a big part of even you guys probably just now got a pretty good dopamine hit, him telling a story about his first squirrel. Yeah. When you take someone out and now that they have a story, and building a story, even the videos now are basically a story. And that storytelling is very intrinsic to human beings. It's very deep. It's a big deal. And when I would come home from Maine and tell my story, now Maine is the promised land. Yep. And the stories of everything is a wonderful way, not only to get people to be inspired to go make their own story, but also to a way of sharing and then keeping the camaraderie up for all the stories. And then how everything went down, the next adventure can be about a story.
That's right.
That's one of the most beautiful things about being a human being is like your story. This is all going to be memories.
Oh, yeah.
Every bit of it is nothing but memories. This is a giant dream. You're either sleeping or awake, but you're dreaming. And it just unfolds in this, and especially if you design it as a story to start with, and you say, okay, let's go have an adventure. Let's begin a story, and then see what happens. And what you make of it and what you bring to your story is so important. And the storytelling part of it is really huge. And a million people have been inspired by someone else's story. I'm sure many of you have.
Yeah, when you're bringing out new people, keeping it light, keeping it fun, not really making the mistakes, and when things don't work out, a big deal. You have to be pretty relaxed about the whole thing and not really attached to outcomes, because you're really going to want them to succeed. You are. But it also can't be that big of a deal at the same time. It has to be expected and okay if it doesn't go the way that it was supposed to. And it also, you need to kind of like underplay when it's not working out, and then in a way also overplay the process and some of the the regular parts of it, and that is what gets people hooked for life. And also giving them a way out. I'm not sure how many of you have heard this story, but Dad and I were hunting in Groton, Vermont. We're on the state land, and we're out deer hunting. And I'm like, we're a couple hours into it, and I don't know how old I was, 12, 13. It was right before I shot my first buck.
Yeah.
I'm breaking sticks, I'm like tossing stuff, and I'm just following Dad through the woods, and we're deer hunting, and we're on this side bank going up in the hardwoods. It's kind of like sloped on both sides. Great spot to see a deer. And he was like, he had stopped, and he turned around and looked at me, and he's like, "What are we doing?" And I'm kind of like, right, like I got the spotlight shined on me, right? And
He's in that little smart ass stage.
Yeah. Right. And I'm like, he's like, "Are we throwing sticks? Are we hunting?" And then he followed it up with, "Because I don't care." Right? And he had said to me, "We can do whatever you want. We don't have to do this." And I was like, "We don't?" Right? Because in a way, I had grown up watching him hunt, and I was always like, this is what Dad does, this is what we do, right? And there was never like you don't have to do this. We can go do anything else. He's like, "We can just sit here and throw sticks. I don't care." He's like, "But we kind of can't do both." And I was like, okay. So I sat there in the silence for a minute, and he had forced me to make a decision. And it was, are we gonna hunt today? Are we gonna hunt at all? Or are we gonna just, what are we doing? And I was like, let's do this, right? And that was the first time I had ever made a conscious decision about being a hunter. And I had made that decision of like, we're out here to do this. Let's go do this, right? And it doesn't mean we didn't have fun. It doesn't mean we weren't distracted. It doesn't mean that didn't happen the rest of the hunting career. But what it did do is he did allow the space for me to make a decision that I didn't have to do this. And especially kids, when kids grow up and their parents, especially I grew up, Rodney Elmer's my father, right? So I grew up like deer heads, taxidermy, hunting, 24/7, 365, and that's just what the family did. But it was like, it doesn't have to be this way. And it was like, okay, is this actually what I want? And I was like, yeah, it is. I do want to do this. I do want to spend time with you, right? And I want to get a deer, and I want to be like that. So we went and did it, and then we ended up shooting my first buck shortly after. And
he got his kinks out right then.
Right, because he was like, what are we doing? And it was like, okay, you know what? Let's actually just do this. And you did, and made a decision. And he gave me space to make a decision, because I kind of it was expected to hunt. And it wasn't like we never had the discussion of we don't have to do this. You don't have to hunt. And I was like, I don't? And I was like, well, I want to. And he's like, okay, well then let's go. And I'm like, okay, right? And it was he just he gave me the chance to resell myself on hunting, and then never looked back.
We went 500 yards and he shot a buck.
Then shot a deer.
Yeah, it's one of our videos. You can watch it, and it's and he's standing up there looking at us, and I'm like, oh, there's a deer.
There's a deer, and I was like, oh sweet,
and oh, it's a buck. Oh,
shoot it.
Go ahead, right?
and it was
wonderful.
As a mentor, he did the right thing. Was he lowered the difficulty of the whole thing. He gave me a chance to succeed. He also gave me a chance to choose differently. Now that's going to be different if somebody comes to you who wants to hunt, who is asking you to mentor them and is looking for that. That's different. When it's your kids, giving them space to be different and then not being attached to whether they choose it or not. That was the big thing that he did. Was he was like, you don't have to be this way, and I'm okay with that. And that actually made me want to do it even more. I was like, well, you know what? I want to do it anyway. And then next thing you know, we're spending a month and a half, 2 months a year together hunting. And the average person when they're turned 30 sees their parents 5 days a year. Just hunting. Right. And I live 2 states over. And just hunting, we spend 6 weeks a year together. And it was and our relationship has almost been hunting. It's almost been built on that since I graduated high school. We've been doing that. I couldn't do that when I was young because I was young. He's a high demand kind of guy. Everybody needs a piece of him. But now that one day is what founded our entire relationship, and all of this stuff is happening because he did that as a mentor and allowed me space to choose to actually want to do this and to commit to it.
Now, the other thing you're doing, especially when you're mentoring, there's expectations on you that you need to come up with the turkey so that they can get
Who
their
knows what
first
you were
bird.
feeling? He's like, I gotta get this kid a
Right,
deer.
right. You have your expectations
Yeah.
on yourself. You have
Yep.
they have expectations of what they hope from nature, they hope from you, they hope from themselves, right? They have to be able to hit the target. They're the expectations,
Yes.
and managing the expectations is the number one biggest challenge.
They have to know it's hard.
Yeah.
They need to know that going into it.
But also too that
But
it's not that hard, right?
What you're after, the only way to communicate that effectively is it doesn't work out all the time. But when it does, it'll be the best day of your life. That intermittent reward.
It
where
might
it's
not be the best day.
Well, it'll impact
Sometimes
you. It'll be memorable. It'll impact
be
you the rest of your
memorable.
life. It will. And having that, managing the expectations and deciding what it is that you're going to do and how you can make them love that process and how you can get them into that and involve them with that. That's going to be the thing that's really going to get somebody to stick to hunting for the rest of their lives. And if you want to get more people into this and you want to get more people who also understand hunting and agree with it, the number one thing to do is to share it. Because without people doing it and without the media, new people can't get into it anyway. Right? So without creating videos and without taking pictures and without sharing stories and writing books and then doing it yourself, without that, the sharing of something is what keeps it going and what inspires people to get into it. Sharing it.
And it also might take a while. He said he's just getting his sister into hunting now. It may take a while.
Yeah.
You know, they may have to be at a certain place in their life before they'd be able to do something.
They have to be ready.
Yeah, and sometimes we tend to want to tell somebody when they're good for it, when they're not.
And when they're real young, yes.
Right.
But
you know, and of course there's always this, like, you'll have to adjust the importance of situations. Some situations are really important, some aren't so much. Some people may feel that it's really important and it's not. Adjusting the importances of oneself against the landscape, the importances of one deer over another or something like that. All of the values will need adjusting like all the time. Some days, your ethics too will need adjusting from day to day. No one is the same person day after day. It's always going to need to be somewhat flexible, and even your values will have to be flexible. And it's such a dynamic thing that it's tough to explain it all and not, like, because it's never really finished. Like, that's the beauty of it. Someone says, well, I could just hunt forever. Well, the truth is that's kind of how it is, and why it holds such a possibility, because there is no doubt about it that there's such a dynamic thing. It's so good for you. There's so much you can get from it and benefit from it, and it's so immersive that it is really kind of the ultimate thing in a lot of ways. And that's why nature is so awesome. That's why creation itself is so awesome. But to have it so that, you know, you're ready for it and you can over time adjust your values. You can get stuck in a value and then just have it follow you your whole life if you want to. I like to get out of the first grade. I want to move on from the third graders' seats. I don't want to stay in third grade forever. So, like, over time, I've adjusted what my values are to some things. And a lot of my fishing values, I value fishing beautiful, but I don't really want to practice it all that much anymore. I'm not really interested in herding a whole bunch of fish, ding, 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 just because I know I can catch them and reel them to the boat, and I can just do it and then let them all go. And
it's one of the only ways to feel a fish being alive.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because when a fish just swims by, like, wow, look at that. But there's the interaction only happens when you're the struggle of you versus him on the end of the line. And there's an unbelievable amount of value for that. But you're going to shift. Like he's saying, you're going to shift.
I don't need to catch, 100 fish in a day to say I'm a fisherman and I feel good, and I don't want to do it at the fish's expense. I'm at that point now where I don't
that might
necessarily
change,
have to
though.
do that.
That might
And
go. You can go like this.
I could change it back if I wanted to, but in general, like you'll develop ways and means of doing and the things that you really like, and you'll also maybe get stuck in some habits too.
That's right. Everyone
And
has a different
you'll have
approach.
to adjust all of those as you go.
Yep.
And I'm trying, I be careful what habits of my own that I might instill in someone else. Right. Teaching is a dangerous thing because you might be wrong.
Yeah, you might be handing them things that are your hangups that are going to be theirs.
And I'm sure you've all experienced that.
You know, yeah, and giving people a chance to hunt their way, and if it's different than yours and it's different than how you're mentoring them, to just let them do that too.
Yeah, yeah.
And also,
great point, Mike.
When you have that kind of relationship and they want to do it a different way, but that's not how you do it, it's like go do that different way with them. Yeah. How did you guys meet Cocoa Puff and start hunting with him? Oh, that's all you.
Yeah, I was.
He's been
checking
there
in.
my whole life, so I don't know.
I shot a buck, and I was checking him in. It was the last weekend of deer season.
Which deer was it?
The Power Station buck.
Oh,
And
probably can't see it.
yeah,
This
and-
one, right?
Yeah, he's up around the corner there. He's a pedestal
there,
mount.
That one right there.
I shot him, and I was checking him in at the check station, and Jimmy came in. He had a doe he had shot, and he came into the check station right after me. And
Which check station?
this was L&M Guns in South Barry, which is long gone.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's a store that's long gone. And I weighed the deer in, and we had just barely thrown him back in the truck, and I hadn't moved my truck out of the way yet. And we were filling out the paperwork. We'd gone outside, weighed the deer, threw it back in the truck, went back inside, and we were filling it out and whatnot. And Jimmy came driving in and parked next to me, and he was waiting to use the scales, and he came in.
Got a nice doe.
And yeah, got a nice and an old one. Oh man,
Big, long.
yeah, long in the tooth. That was one of the oldest does I've seen. He did her a favor. Her teeth were flat to the gums. You know, she was one that needed to go.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Wow, what a nice buck! What did that thing weigh?" And I said, 195. And he's like, 195 at the end of the season.
Big
Wow,
one.
that is a monster.
For Vermont. Nice one.
Where'd you get it? And I said, over here. And he went, oh no. So we talked about it, and he was
Because
super happy
Jimmy
with it.
lives pretty close to my grandparents, to his parents' place, right down the road in Orange.
Yeah.
So that whole area there, when there's a good buck going through there, everybody knows.
Everybody
about
knows
it. Everybody
about it.
knows about it.
Yeah. And so anyway, he was. We were looking at his doe. I moved my truck out of the way, and then I went back and I helped him get the doe out and put it on the scales. And she was big. She was a big old horse doe, right? Big long face on her. And we weighed her in, and she was huge. And he was pretty happy with her. And he says, and then the guy who owns the store says, yeah, Rodney's a taxidermist. And he says, oh, and Jimmy asked me, you gonna get that buck mounted? And Leon, the guy who's running, he says, yeah, you know any good taxidermists? He's a taxidermist, you know. Of course he's gonna mount it. and Jimmy says, oh, really? Well, I was thinking about getting this doe mounted. And I'm like, sure. So I just cut it right here, cut it right there, and bring it right up to my shop. So he came up to the shop, and we had like a 3-hour gabbing session in the shop.
On the porch.
Yeah.
That was back when it was in the house still.
Yeah. And then one thing led to another. He came back up later on, and we were talking and just got pretty friendly and just got to talking. And then later on,
And you guys know
we ought to
Jimmy.
go
He's
hunting.
awesome.
Yep. And we ended up going hunting, and there was no turning around after that. Yep. A great relationship.
And then he became a big part of our lives. We see him.
Yep.
Like to see him more during the rest of the year, but we're all
definitely.
working all the time. But he's pretty awesome.
Yep.
And Jimmy's one of those guys that he'll leave it all on the field. You know, he'll share every piece of information he's got. He'll tell you where all the deer are that you want to get. He'll give you every little piece, and he'll help you drag it. And you know, and he's such a good team player, and he's unbelievable. And who you surround yourself with, because your mentorship like continues constantly, and the people that you hunt with will constantly be feeding back into your education too. And the continuing to learn as a mentor and continuing to surround yourself with people who want to keep going and want to progress and want to get better, that's something that's going to help you in hunting in general, is the camaraderie and creating these little hunting parties that we all have, and you know, bounce off each other and make it an exercising community. That's really where it's at. You know, we're all here right now on a Sunday morning, even though we have tons of stuff to do, and we're all talking deer hunting because we all share this, you know, passion. We share the love for it, and how important the whole system is to us. you know, and that's the stuff that has to be communicated, because we haven't I haven't put the video out yet, but when we took Kendall Gray hunt with us, and he comes from a different part of the world where there isn't a deer camp, and you hunt solo on whatever property you have access to, and you kind of sit there and you hope one comes over your bait or whatever, and then you shoot him, and then you drag it out of the woods and you bring it back to your house, and that's it. And they see more deer, they get more deer more regularly. And when he came up to Maine, we're like, this is hard. If you see a deer this week, you're doing good. And he's like, if I see one. And it's like, yeah. He goes the entire week, barely sees one. I don't even know if he saw the
Just
doe
a
that
flag.
him and I jumped.
Just a
I think he
flag.
saw
With me,
one
he saw a
tail,
flag. Yep.
right? And we asked him what was his favorite part, and he was like, deer camp. When everybody gets together and it's a trip, and it's like, you guys come up here and you just batten down the hatches and hunt for 6 weeks straight together, and it's just this reviewing footage, party, eating food, having fun, playing cards, and then we all go out and we hunt and we get back and we tell stories and stuff. And the community that we build around the deer hunting part is the best thing of it, and that's what gets new people into it. The taking them to camp and having it be a trip away from home. You know, it might be hard to get them there, but once you do, that's the thing that really makes it solid.
The friendships have just been that.
And the
that
adventure,
alone.
it makes it an adventure. You're going out into the woods and you're doing all this crazy stuff, and it makes it fun and exciting and memorable. And that's what gets them to attach to it.
Yep. Yep.
I just broke away from the chat. 2 deer hats. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for picking up a couple hats. We appreciate that. Supporting the channel.
Yep.
Nice. Appreciate it.
A lot of the experiences that we're recording, and the way the channel has been for us has been exactly the same, right? Number one, we're remembering our memories, because you get to watch Jimmy and his muzzleloader hunt, and he's telling the story in the snow with his hat in the tailgate, right? That's phenomenal stuff. Jeff telling his story, right? All of that is phenomenal in its inspiration quality, but also too in its friendship and its lasting part of the quality of it. And when someone says there's no value to some of the things that happen that we do, like, it's a shame, because there is value to it, and we do value it a lot. You know, if somebody were to ask me, well, how do you feel about your rifle? Well, I'm in love with that gun. And it's not what necessarily what I've done with the gun, but the memories and
what it
represents is huge. And the same thing with the social media. It has turned into this friendship of us and all of the hundreds of thousands and millions of people that we've interacted with. Wow. And he's like, no, we got to do this. And I'm like, who cares what we're doing, you know? But the fact of the matter is that it has positively affected many, many people, and it's killed a lot of deer. But also too, it's created this friendship that we may, you know, not see everybody and know everybody exactly, but it's been a wonderful experience, and thank God for hunting, because it's made so many friends.
Yep.
Like, it's been incredible, and so glad to do it, and glad you guys interact with it, and glad you have fun doing it, and we have a blast doing it as well. And I hope everybody has a YouTube channel. I hope everybody does it, even though there's times when you might not represent things quite the way I might say.
It's risky.
I wouldn't do that, right? But overall, they're being themselves, and of course, it's easy to see what someone else is doing wrong, not looking at yourself. And this has been great for me, because it's given me a good view of how I actually am.
Yeah.
And it'll give them a record, and all the people of the future will get to know who I was in a more personal way than they ever could have before. And I would have loved to see my great-great-grandfather speak. Right? And there wasn't this stuff around back then. So if it has some kind of legacy of truth and beauty and of nature that will matter to beauty and nature in the future, well, then it's doing some good. And it did me plenty of good. And I hope it does the world some good as well. And everyone participating in it has been awesome, and it's
Yeah.
been humbling, to tell you the truth.
Yeah,
It's
we
really been
appreciate all
something.
you guys. We appreciate you tuning in. Appreciate this conversation and chats. And
How far and wide the reach is just phenomenal.
Minnesota and Michigan
Yep.
and Maine and New York and Vermont and New Hampshire and all of the other states that you guys are in, and that you guys all take your time out to come here and chat with us and have a conversation. You support the channel, you support us, and you help us get these messages out, because there are things I'm sure you guys live by just as well. And if we can share more of what it is that hunting does to us, how it affects us, and why we do it, and bring that out and make space for people that way and give them something they can connect with, right? Because when people just see the pictures on the wall of us holding a deer and we're smiling and stuff, they might relate with the enjoyment, but they don't relate with any other part of it. They don't relate with you. And the thing that gets people into it is the values. It's conveying why and how, and giving them something that they could see themselves in. That's how you're going to get more people into hunting. You get it into by sharing it, by sharing the experience of it. Like, think of how you got into it. That's probably how everyone else is going to have to get into it too. And then you're going to have to be that person for a bunch of other people. Like, if everyone who did this kind of thing represented it as good as they possibly could, shared it, and just lived and didn't try to get people into it, right? You don't need to get people to, into it for hunting's sake. You want them to be inspired into it because you know what it's going to do for them by sharing what it's done for you. That's how you actually get new people into hunting. It's like, why should they do it? And then go live by that and share that, and then they'll get into it. And if they don't, then perfect, because they're not the people who you want into it. The people you want to get into hunting are the people that share the values of what hunting represents and what you represent. That's why they get into it. Right. And the people who don't see the value and the people who won't be affected by that, they won't. I had a conversation with this guy recently. Went out to dinner, we're talking real estate, things like that, marketing, and we started talking about hunting because he wanted to make content. And I don't know if you know this, but we, the boys and I, do tree work and stuff like that, and we put out content about cutting trees, and tons of followers. But what we get more tons of is negative comments. A mountain of strange allocation, weird judgment, insult. We get a mountain. My phone rings all day long with people insulting me. And he's like, I don't think I could take that. And I was like, well, first of all, you've never been criticized by anybody doing better than you, not once. And the other thing too is, I was like, you're not looking for them. I was like, you're looking for the people that share the same values as you. And you need to just talk about your experience and share that. And the people who resonate with you are going to click, and you're going to help inspire them, and you're going to get them going. It's like, we're here for you guys. We're not here for all the people who don't like how we hunt, or don't like, how we talk about things, or how we do things, or how much we talk, or whatever. They might not be into that, but they might be into, something else. So they go that way. You just go out and share, be and hunt how you would do it, and then you'll make room for more people to get inspired to do it too. That's all you have to do.
Yeah. And of course, the other really, probably lastly, most important kind of part about hunting and what it can do for you is like that deer camp feeling. When you go to deer camp, and nothing beats deer camp. Well, that feeling that you get is because you're so being you, and you're so in the moment, and you enjoy it so much. People will say, "Oh, deer season's over, and it's going to be 345 days till deer season," right? Because they're already counting the days down to them going back to being their best selves.
Well,
that's
who
where they feel
want to
the best. They want to keep that on a roll, right?
Yeah.
And of course, that's what it can do for you. Is it can be this little sanctuary of you being you, and loving what you do, and loving where you are, and then being able to connect with all of it. And I think if you went to deer camp all the time, then you might like regular life a little more.
It wouldn't be as special.
Right. So the coming and going, the seasonality of deer season, the seasonality of hunting is actually very, very good.
It's very important too.
And so like we're into it, but then we go clunk. We just drop our tools. We drop our tools and go hunting, and then we drop our guns and we go back to our tools.
It also takes time
we do them both.
to straighten out the mess of things that have stacked up while we've been gone hunting.
That's a long
for
period
six
to be out of
weeks.
it. Oh yeah.
So it's like
definitely.
you got a lot to catch up on. You have a lot of things to straighten out too. So you know, that's it. And back to that guy that I was talking to. I explained hunting and the effects that it has, you know, and he's like, I'd never heard of it that way. He's like, I didn't know that was a thing.
Coming up with